Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Now in the last two seminars, the annual seminars, I have had the privilege of taking up Dharma as the topic of discussion, and I would like to take it forward because I have confused myself enough with that. So I would like to take the thread forward, and I have taken the topic, and Akka has allowed me Dharma and self-enquiry. Now, fortunately for me, I decided not to go into the meaning of Dharma as per Sanskrit, because I know that in Sanskrit there must be literally hundreds of meanings for Dharma. So what I thought was, let me myself think over what do we normally mean by Dharma in common day parlance, in day-to-day usage. Then I came up with two things which, if it's acceptable with you, I will go ahead as the usage of Dharma. One meaning is that the right action. Dharma is what action is right in a particular situation. Is that all right with you? That is, that's all right with all of you? Like Venkateshji says, let's put up the hands so that we get some action going. Otherwise, I am capable of putting people to sleep even while standing. Now, that's one meaning of Dharma, that is the right action to take. Another meaning of Dharma is that the guna. What is the Dharma of fire? If we say, it is to, the Dharma of fire is to burn, we say. What is the Dharma of Akasha? Is that Vedanta says that Dharma of Akasha is to provide space for all other Bhutaganas and the combination of Bhutaganas. So it provides space, it provides space for the other elements. So the second meaning, can we have it as guna? Is it all right? Dharma means, what is the Dharma of, let us say, Bhumi? What is the Dharma of Akasha? What is the Dharma of Atma? What is the Dharma of Anatma? We could mean that it is the guna or quality. Is it all right? These are the two meanings. What is to do is one Dharma, and what is the quality? Am I talking Greek and Latin? Is it all right? Shall we go ahead? Yeah. Now, getting into the topic of Dharma and self-enquiry, over the last 2-3 seminars, I have taken up inquiring deeply into Dharma in all its facets and then linking it to self-enquiry. But today I would like to take what is the Dharma of self-enquiry itself. What is the Dharma of self-enquiry? Not in comparison with other Dharmas, but what do we do? What do we do as in Atmavicharam, and what is the nature of Atmavicharam? So these are the two aspects. I will be using them interchangeably. You can do as Venkateshji suggests, Manana can be done and try to make out which is which. But let's begin with Bhagavan and Ramana Gita. The Ramana Gita chapter 3 deals with paramount duty of man, paramount dharma. What is the highest task? Our master of ceremony has already quoted the verse, so I will not take the trouble of re-quoting the verse. I will only state the meaning of the verses. Incidentally, we chant Ramana Gita also on Saturdays in the shrine, along with other Bhagavan's works, Upadesha Saram, Saddarshanam, Bhagavad Gita Sara, between 11 and 12. The Parayanam has helped me a lot in Sanskrit, but not enough to quote here, especially after such a speaker has gone. Now, in chapter 3, the paramount duty of man is asked by Daivrata. The Ramana Gita itself is a set of questions by very serious seekers. Ganapati Muni being at the head of that group, asking those questions to Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi and Bhagavan responding. And this is a very important question because it almost drives the tenor of the whole work. The question says, ask, O Bhagavan, I'll read it as it's translated. In samsara, what is the paramount task of man? We have seen from Professor Natarajan sir that the going inward, and we have seen the inner purity touched upon by Venkatesh ji. We have seen that instead of discussing how the Vidya and Avidya arise in link or in relation to each other, seek to know for whom is Vidya and Avidya, then that Vidya, which is self-knowledge, is Paramartha Vidya, is the highest Vidya. We saw the Guruji quote for us from Saddarshanam. But here, Bhagavan is asked, in samsara, which is the outer and inner world, what is the paramount task of man? Bhagavan says in verse 2, the aspirant. So, first of all, as suggested by our earlier speakers, there should be an aspiration for getting liberation or aspiration for the higher good. The aspirant has to discover his own real nature, Swaswarupa, which is the basis of all actions and their fruit. I will stop there. Bhagavan suggests in one go that the paramount duty of man, not in comparison with anything, the paramount duty of man is to know his real nature. And he gives why? Because that real nature is the basis for all actions and their fruit. What do we want? What do we need? We need some fruits. But what is the basis for action and fruits? It is our real nature. Without knowing this, being just superfluous in the area of action and results pushes us into the wheel of samsara. So Bhagavan says, now how do we understand this? How do we understand that who we are determines our actions? There is a small story shared between Bhagavan and Narasimha Swami. Narasimha Swami BV is the lawyer, devotee, who is the biographer of Bhagavan. He is an international lawyer or lawyer of international repute. Unfortunately, he has some setback in his family, some serious sorrow, and he is pushed into the spiritual enquiry and he comes to Bhagavan. But his questions are very serious and very helpful for us. He asks Bhagavan, what is this connection between who I am and what action I am going to do and what I am going to experience? These are all different. What actions come to me from somewhere and how I react to them and how I experience them are totally not connected with me. Then Bhagavan tells a story. See, even in the relative area, we can understand that who we are really determines how we are going to act and how we are going to enjoy the situation. He says, there is a hunter who has been after a tiger skin which is in demand from a foreign country. A foreign buyer is waiting with so much money for a tiger skin. And this hunter is knowing he is living in the edge of the forest. He knows there is a beautiful tiger tenanting that forest nearby. Therefore, he is an expert hunter. He decides that he will have a goat as a bait and he will catch the tiger. So what he does, he ties the goat to a tree, goes up to a nearby tree, constructs a small shed there and is waiting there. Now the scene described by Bhagavan is that the tiger has now entered the thicket. The edge of the clearing, it is there. The goat is waiting, bleating, or whatever, bleating pitifully for life. Sometimes they don't even bleat. I have seen goats in the nearby butcher stall happily feeding away with grass and fighting for grass. Sometimes I wonder whether we are having some relationship with that. I don't know. But I have seen very heavily built goats standing and enjoying grass and fighting for the grass with other goats, tied very near to the carcass hanging around there. The goat is bleating, the tiger has come, and the hunter is sitting on top. So now Bhagavan asks B. Narasimha Swami, do you think the actions and happiness of all the three are the same? The event is the same. The event, what? There is only one event. There is a tree on top of which hunter is there. There is a tree to which the goat is tied. There is a tiger which has come. Then B. Narasimha Swami says, no. The happiness of all the three are different. There is no happiness for the goat, whether it knows it or not. There is really no happiness for the goat at any time. The happiness of the tiger, who has won a little bit of money in this world or whatever, with fighting and with knowledge or whatever, and has some balance in bank, the happiness of the tiger is short-lived. Because the hunter is going to trap it. The hunter is going to shoot it in no time. The moment it puts its fangs into the, or claws or whatever into the goat, the hunter is going to shoot from top. So the happiness of the goat is not at all there. The happiness of the tiger, the victors in this game, is fleeting. And the happiness of the hunter, who knew all this, seems to be abiding in this story right from beginning, because he is aware of what all is going to transpire. So there is difference. So now Bhagavan says, do you agree that the actions and the happiness in life depends on who you are? Now let us say it is not very clear with this. Let us take another example of a great gentleman called Trachtenberg. I have appreciated him because I used to teach Vedic mathematics and shortcuts in mathematics as part of the curriculum for competitive exam passing people. I had an institute for that. Now this Trachtenberg, his life is very interesting. It throws a beautiful light on how important it is to know who we are. Now, Trachtenberg was a Jew. You know the Jews were, he was one of the Jews who were put in concentration camp by Hitler. So the food provided was soup with only water, and for every 1,000 liters there will be one aloo or something like that. So unhealthy, and they used to be made to lift very heavy stones. That's how his biography is written. Practically the same miserable situation is available to all the other people there. That is exactly the situation to him. He is not made supervisor or anything. But despite that, he starts thinking, how can I be of use to the world? You imagine his body is being put to all kinds of pains. But his mind is saying, I have so much knowledge about education, how can I be of use to this world? So in all his free time, he is writing mathematics and schooling. He is writing, and he has come to the same Vedic mathematics shortcuts on his own. On his own he has arrived at the same shortcuts. Whom to praise, I don't know. Whether the Vedic scholars for having found out thousands of years ago, or Trachtenberg for having found out on his own in dire circumstances. But the same situation, who Trachtenberg is, now still there are Trachtenberg schools in Sweden, I suppose. There are schools. The children are learning by his method. So it becomes very clear, isn't it, that who we are is, we used to have this discussion at home, that some people are, my better half used to say there is a poem, I don't know which poem, that the poem is about a constantly happy person and a constantly sorrowful person. The personality itself is whatever is offered, that person sees the positive. The other person, whatever is offered, this is what our Professor Natarajan has also mentioned in the beginning, that there will be some people who will find happiness wherever they are put. So the personal, the whom you are, this is what we are going to see in our ballet also to come up, though I am revealing an official secret, that the personality, whom we are, what is the nature of ours, even in a relative term. In Bhagavan, in this sentence is not referring to the relative personality. He is saying that the aspirant has to discover his own real nature. When we discover our real nature, the game is over. Even relatively we understand, if Trachtenberg can be happy there. There are many situations in life you will find in Mahatma Gandhi's life also, that he has taken decisions where all the people around him are for something else. But he would have taken it very, very easily and lightly, and he would have gone ahead. There will be a decision to be taken about whether we should go ahead with the non-cooperation in 1942, when World War is, all the great ones who are fighting for Indian liberation are with him. They are all for increasing the non-cooperation. Everybody. But Gandhiji says, this is a time when the world is suffering as a common entity, and Britons are fighting for the world, for the rest of the world. Let us not put pressure on them now. Let the world war be over, then we will go for... No, this he says, amidst what, there is a small girl waiting for him. Mahatma, the goat has broken his feet, we should bandage it. Then Gandhiji says, you wait for 2 minutes, I will come and join you. See, he is so sure. He's in his humility. See, the humility is also a strength. The surrender to God is also having a dharma. We will see that later. And it's not weakness, it is definitely not weakness. It has a dharma of its own, it has a quality of its own. And Gandhiji says, just wait for 2 minutes, I will come and join you. And he turns to these people and says, see, this is not the time to pressurize them. Such a decision is able to tell and is able to go ahead. So, is it not very important to know who we are? Isn't it? So, that's the thing that's coming through. Now, how to do this? What is the dharma, or what is the method of doing self-enquiry? So, first, we have seen that it is the paramount duty. What is the method? It is answered in the next question itself, because Devrata asks, what in brief is the means to know one's real nature? What is the effort that can bring about the sublime inner vision? How to do this? And it has been covered beautifully by the professor that we are not the sensory body, we are not the mind also. So Bhagavan says here, strenuously withdrawing all thoughts from sense objects, one should remain fixed in steady, non-objective enquiry. Strenuously withdrawing all thoughts, all attention outward from sense objects, one should remain steady in a fixed, non-objective self-attention. Now, if we are in self-attention, how will things of the world go on? That will be the next question, isn't it? Now, there are two suggestions by Bhagavan. One is that the Ishvara, who is present within everyone, is running the entire cosmos according to the prarabdha of each individual. Therefore, don't worry. Now, you can try to practice this for the rest of the session. What you can do is pay less attention to your ears, but you can try to pay attention to yourself. See, the rest of the exchange from my side can be made as self-attention practice for you. It is called as Drishya Anuvida Samadhi. Though I may be speaking and different words may be coming to you, don't strain your ears. Let the jiva not go out through the ears much. Let the jiva be focused on who I am. Okay? Or suppose you are used to only dhyana. Suppose you are used to chanting the name of God in the mind. You can do that. Pay less attention to the ear. What is to be received through the ear? will be received by Ishvara's grace. Don't worry. I am not going to say something much more moving than your self-attention, than your dhyana. Dhyana is more paramartha than what is going to be coming through Shravana. That is what Venkatesh ji has pointed out. So the rest of the few minutes that we are going to spend, you can attempt this. That what will happen to the world? Will my listening be corrupted? I am sure you are going to be surprised. So if you are used to dhyanam, do the dhyanam of your deity. If you are used to self-attention, now pay less attention to the ears. I will also be saved in the process. Now you can pay attention to the self, to the source of the mind. Now here comes Kapali Shastri on our behalf and says, you are saying that you attend to the self. But my experience is that I am the body. You are saying you pay attention to the self. The self has no limits. The Sat was described in detail by the professor that the Sat is Anadi, it is Ananta, it is Avyaya, it is Akshara. It is having no limits. But my experience is I am caught up somewhere, I am trapped somewhere, everybody is pressurizing me, some ad is pulling me, whether to buy the product or not, I seem to be pulled and pushed from all sides. Now, I don't realize. Then Bhagavan says, presently you are feeling that you are the body, or the consciousness has limited itself to the body. That is called as ego self. Bhagavan calls it as ego self. Now, next question Kapali Shastri asks is, now are you asking me to find out what is this ego self? What use is it knowing what is this ego? Then Bhagavan says the beautiful dharma of self-enquiry. This is the dharma of self-enquiry. What self-enquiry does to one. Bhagavan says, of course the body is inert, it is unconscious, and the self is full of consciousness. Between these two, a false entity has arisen, partaking in both the qualities, both the dharmas. For the body, there is no consciousness. Inertness is its dharma. For the self, consciousness is its dharma. Absolute pure consciousness is its dharma. But in between these two, there is a self, the ego, which says, I am the body, and partakes in the dharma of the body, and partakes in the dharma of the self. I am caught up like this. What to do, Bhagavan? Then Bhagavan says, I am coming to your rescue. When you are self-attentive, as I am asking you to be now, when the ego is self-attentive, self-awareness is the nature of Paramatman. Self-awareness is the nature of the self. So when it tries to be self-attentive instead of object-attentive, the ego partakes lesser and lesser in the inert body and partakes more and more and more and more in the pure consciousness. What happens what is the dharma? What does self-enquiry do? Is it completely useless to the day-to-day dweller today? Absolutely not.